Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Chivio Tech Talk session. Today's the topic is testing the unthinkable. Okay, so this is the Tech Talk content that I have included today. Starting from the introduction, I'll take you uh, on few sub topics until the end because I want to give you some kind of a knowledge on how you can identify, how you can prioritize, and how you can do the edge case testing, which is very important to your software development projects. Since this is a theoretical presentations, I'm not going to give you lengthy explanations about these topics, but I'll try my maximum to emphasize what I really wanted to highlight under these topics in this slide. Okay, so let's move to the introduction slide. Okay, in this presentation, I will discuss the importance of edge case testing in software development, including how to find, how to prioritize, and how to test the edge cases. Extensive testing, or we call edge case testing of an application, is very important if you want to make a successful web product. And also, edge case testing plays a vital role in your product. So here, uh, in this presentation, I will explore what edge cases are, why they are important to test for, and how to identify and test for them. By end of this presentation, you will have a better understanding of how edge case testing can help you to improve the quality and the reliability of your software product. This is not a complex topic to understand, but very crucial one. Here, I mainly target the QA engineers as the audience who should do the edge case testing somewhere in the testing life cycle. And also, I want to tell you in this presentation, I have included the knowledge that I have gained through my 12 years of experience in edge case testing, and also what I have newly learned through the researches that I did for this tech talk preparations. So I must say, all these talent of identifying edge cases comes through your past experiences and the way that you focus on the product functionality. Uh, the reason behind of this topic selection is actually that I have experienced several times as QA engineers, we sometimes tend to only focus on the functional testing, which is mainly rely on the happy path, and due to the time constraints, we easily skip the edge case testing phase, which we should not to do. So my intention of having this presentation is to enhance your interest on executing edge case testing in your projects to show you the importance of this testing phase. So that's about introduction. So let's move to the next slide. What is an edge case in software testing? Uh, in software testing, an edge case is a problem that is not likely to have a serious effect on the experience of most end users. An edge case only affects a small subset of users, not all the users sometimes. Small subset of users often occurs under configurations or under some circumstances that rarely exist in the real world environment. So the edge test cases are sometimes hard to produce, and missed edge case scenarios can become a showstopper. That means an obstacle in the future progress. So I have given you an introduction about what is an edge case in the slide. So according to the description, simply it says edge cases are the scenarios which are uncommon, unknown feature of the requirements. Let's move to the next slide. What is an edge test case example. Before you start in edge testing, you should know what are the edge test case examples available in your that you can include to your testing life cycle. I think it's better if I can provide you some examples of edge cases scenarios starting from a very simple one. So this is a very simple example. Assume that you are going to log into a website. When you are logging to the website, you can input incorrect username or a password and hit the login button. So the expected results should be you should not be able to log in and a proper message should be displayed to the user. So in this very simple example, this design test case is to test the system's response when incorrect username or password information is entered. If you enter the correct username or and the password both, then you will definitely able to log into the system. But here you did the negative thing. So the tester can use this edge case scenario to test the system's functionality by entering invalid inputs. So this test ensures the system is secure and the application provides the expected user experience. Apart from this example that I've given to you, I will take you through some different domains as you can see in the slide. And under these domains, I will explain what are the sample examples that we can get for the edge case testing. Here I have mentioned four domains: software development, web development, database management, and the security testing. So if I take the software development first, we can take the example as the empty input. So here we can test how the software behaves when provided with no input or an empty data set. That means if you take the previous example, before hit the login button, if you if assume that you are going to hit the login button without entering any username or the password, that means empty input. So in that time also you should not be able to log in and a proper error message should be displayed. So that is a one example that you can include for the software development related to the edge cases. And the other one is the boundary values. That means you can test with values at the low and upper boundaries of acceptable ranges. For example, if you take a data range from 1 to 100, you can take the minimum 1 and just above the minimum 2 and a nominal value middle somewhere in the data range and just below the maximum that is 99 and the maximum 100. So likewise you can execute that boundary values analysis. That's one technique that we use for the QA testing. So you can use that technique and you can write a test case in order to test your software development according to this strategy. The other one is null references. So in the null references, you can test how the software handles null references or null values. And the other one is large inputs. You can test with very large input sizes to see how the software handles scalability. For example, if you have a system where to input the email address, so usually we don't have lengthy email addresses, but for the testing purposes, you can input a lengthy email addresses and see how it saves. Sometimes it might not be saved because if you have not set the maximum character limit or you have limited the character size, so then it will not save. And sometimes the UI will not properly arrange after you save in a lengthy email addresses. So likewise, you can input large inputs and see how the system behaves. The other one is unexpected data types. Here, you can test with unexpected data types that might be technically valid but not typically used. For example, in your system, there might be a place to upload documents. Okay, so manually uploaded a drag and drop. So in that case, so and it allows only for assume it allows only for PDF or docs, but you are going to upload a notepad. So then it should not be allowed to upload, and there should be a proper error message shown. But since the requirement says only the PDF and the docs should be allowed, so you might not be you might miss to test for the note or the other document type. So in that case, it's very important if you can test for other types as well. So that's why that's also one other example for the unexpected data types. And the other domain is web development. So when it comes to the web development, you can test for unsupported browsers. Test how the web application behaves in all the browsers or browsers with limited support for certain features. The cross-browser testing. That technique comes under this category. And you can test for network failures. Here you can simulate network failures or interruptions to see how the system behaves in that kind of a situation and how the system recovers. The next one is heavy traffic. Here you can test with a large number of concurrent users or requests to see how the application handles load. The load testing or the performance testing comes under this category. That is about the web development. So if I then now we'll go to the database management domain. So there, the first one I have mentioned is empty databases. So you can test how the application behaves when the database is empty or lacks expected data. And the other one is database connection failures. Here you can simulate database connection failures to see how the application responds in that kind of a situation. And the other one is database query performance. Here you can test with large data sets to see how efficiently queries are executed. That is about the database management domain. Now I'll take you to the security testing domain. So here the first one I have mentioned is SQL injection. You can test if the application is vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. The penetration testing comes under this kind of a category. The other one is cross-site scripting. Test if the application is vulnerable to XSS attacks. The last one is invalid user inputs. Here you can test with malicious or unexpected user inputs to check for robustness of the product, the strongness of the product. So likewise, edge case testing helps to uncover vulnerabilities, bugs, or unexpected behaviors that might not be evident during the normal testing scenario. So it is very important to have these edge test cases in your testing suits before you uh, release the product to the production. Okay, let's move to the next slide. That is why are edge cases important to consider? Edge cases, here I have given you a lengthy explanation about why they are important to consider, but without reading the description here, I will explain more what the description says. The first one, it says, edge cases can reveal flaws in a system or a process that may not be visible in typical scenario. So then we can identify and address potential issues by considering edge cases before they become a bigger problem. And the second point is edge cases often represent real world scenarios that may occur infrequently. We cannot say Edge cases are occurring frequently. They are occurring infrequently, but still have a significant impact if not properly addressed under your testing phase. The third point is edge cases can also help us to improve the user experience by identifying situations where the users may encounter unexpected behaviors or errors. So addressing these edge cases can make our systems more user-friendly. The last point is edge cases can seriously affect patient safety or financial stability in some industries, such as healthcare or finance. Because in the healthcare sector, all the equipment we have in the ICU, for example, so the highly risk patients are mainly rely on those equipments. So there should not be missed any edge case scenarios because otherwise it will be a problem for that patient. So within these scenarios, we can ensure that our systems are designed to minimize the risk and protect those who rely on them. So that is about the edge case importance to consider. Okay, let's move to the next slide. How to find edge cases in software testing. So, edge cases in software testing are scenarios that are outside the normal range of input behaviors. It involves a systematic approach to identify scenarios that are outside the typical or the expected usage patterns. So it is very important to know how we can find the edge cases in software testing. Otherwise, you might you might not be able to do a full testing before you do the production release. Here I have included several strategies and techniques that will help you to find edge cases. So I'll take you through one by one. The first one is review requirements and use cases. So here, carefully, we have to analyze the functional and non-functional requirements to identify any specific conditions or constraints that should lead to an edge case. After you get the tickets or whatever the PBIs from the product owner side, you have to carefully analyze the functional and non-functional requirements to identify how we can define edge cases uh, under that functionality. So consider unusual or rare scenarios that users might encounter in the real world use. For example, after you release the product to the world, you don't know who are the users are using this product. Sometimes they might, sometimes they are very serious users. Sometimes they will play around this software. So in that case, what will happen? So you have to think in that way and analyze and define the edge cases based on the requirements and use cases. That is a one technique that you can use to find edge cases. The other one is boundary value analysis. So I have mentioned you before as well. In boundary value analysis, what you have to do is mainly focus on boundaries of input ranges such as minimum, maximum, and the nominal value within that minimum and maximum range. So here you can test with values that are at the edges of acceptable ranges to see how the software behaves. The third technique I have mentioned here is equivalence partitioning. Always boundary value analysis comes after the equivalence partitioning. You can divide input conditions into equivalent classes and ensure edge cases are covered within each class. So you can test with inputs that fall on the boundaries between the equivalent classes. For example, If I take the previous example, 1 to 100, so here you can divide the data set into small units. For example, you can test the minus 1. So if the data range is 1 to 100, you can test for 0.9, and you can test for 1 and 1.1 and the nominal value range, and then you can test for 99.99 and for the 100 and then 101 or 100.01, whatever. So that in according to that technique, you have to divide the set of data into small units, and based on that you have to write your test cases to test that edge cases which might be a problem in the future when the users are using the product. The other technique is negative testing. So here also you can test with invalid or unexpected inputs to see how the software handles errors or edge conditions. This negative testing includes input like empty strings, null value, or out of range values where applicable. The other one is use historical data or user stories. So here you can draw insights from past incidents, user feedback, or historical data that indicates uh, edge cases that have caused issues in the past. And also you can consider scenarios that may not have been initially uh, anticipated but have emerged from user stories or support tickets or PBIs. That is that. And the other technique you can use is exploratory testing. Here you can conduct exploratory testing sessions where testers actively seek out unusual or extreme scenarios. So you can use creativity and domain knowledge to simulate real-world edge cases that users might encounter. And the other one is error guessing. So based on your experience, predict potential edge cases and purposely test for them. So that's why I mentioned you earlier, when you do the edge cases, you need your experiences, your talent on finding edge cases, and the experience that you have gained throughout your QA career. And the other thing is, if you take the error guessing technique, you have to focus on areas of the software that are complex, that are error prone, or critical for the application's functionality. Guess the errors and write your test cases. The other one is environmental variations. You can test under different environmental conditions such as different network speeds, different operating systems, or low memory situations. So consider how the software behaves under adverse conditions like high traffic. The other one is collaboration and brainstorming. So I don't know whether it is practical to use for your projects, but here it states involve stakeholders, developers, and testers in brainstorming sessions to identify potential edge cases. You can get the knowledge from them, and based on their guessings, you can define the edge cases. So, because different perspectives and domain expertise can contribute to uncovering scenarios that may not have been initially considered by you. The last one is automation. So in automation, automate test for identified edge cases to ensure that they are consistently tested during regression cycles. So you can use the scripts that cover boundary values, invalid inputs, or other edge conditions to test the coverage. For example, take that same example, the login example. Here you can write a script to test for null values, test for the boundary values. So likewise, empty values. So likewise, you can include that automation scripts in your regression cycle to test them in every testing life cycle before you do the production release. That is about the finding edge cases in software testing. So you can simply use these kind of techniques to find the edge cases, and it will help you to do your testing in properly without doing any mistakes. So we'll move to the next slide. That is deciding whether to ignore edge cases in software testing. Even though edge cases are important to consider, there might be some situations that you have to that you should ignore the edge cases. So I'm going to talking about those situations. So there are no any hard and fast rules about deciding whether to ignore an edge case, because engineers must make the decision on a case by case basis considering the following questions. So here I have included 5 questions that you can consider based on these questions whether we are going to consider the edge cases or whether we are going to ignore the edge cases in software testing. The first question is, what percentage of total users are affected by the bug? I told you, not all the users, sometimes only few users might affect with this edge case scenario. So the fewer users affected, the less sense it typically makes to fix the bug. So then in that case, sometimes we might need to ignore the edge case. And the other question is how much revenue is at stake. Revenue per user is also important. If the users affected by the bug account for significant revenue, then even if the total number of users is low, it should get more priority to fix. The third question is how much time does the team expect the fix to take? If it's a quick fix, it's probably worth doing. The other question is, will the fix delay other goals, such as releasing a major new version of an application? Here, it might make more sense to ignore the bug if the fix doesn't stall other operations. There's a less of a case to be made for ignoring it. And the last one is, can users work around the bug? In some cases, it might be feasible to teach users on how to avoid the bug. So I'll give an example. There might, uh, in one situation, there might need to upgrade a new browser version. So although ideally the bug wouldn't exist at all, providing workarounds make fixing the bug, which is less important. So based on these questions that I have included in the presentation slide, you can decide whether you are going to ignore the edge case or you are going to consider the edge case in software testing. And we'll move to the next slide. Best practices for dealing with edge cases in software testing. Okay, so here I have mentioned the best practices which are dealing with edge cases. To ensure the team is prepared to work with edge cases as effectively as possible, we have to consider following strategies. The first one is collect the right data. What it means, data about how many users are affected and how much revenue is at stake helps to make effective decisions about the edge cases. So you need that strategy to deal with edge cases. The other one is consider revenue and cost. For example, consider how much revenue the business could lose if the team ignores the bug, and the cost of tying down developers to fix the bug instead of working on a new product feature. The third strategy is count total edge cases. So, based on the number of edge cases that you find or define, you can decide what to do with this edge case scenario. And the last one is systemize edge case management. Although every edge case is unique, establishing a standard protocol for assessing edge cases helps to ensure that the team makes consistent decisions about which bugs to fix and which one to ignore. So you can systemize the edge cases based on that, and then you can set the priority and do the needful. That is about the best practices that you can use to deal with the edge cases. Let's move to the next slide. There I have going to tell you how to prioritize edge cases. Prioritizing edge cases can be challenging because, as I have informed mentioned you earlier, these are rare and unique scenarios. So, however, it is important to prioritize these cases as they can seriously impact the users, products users experience and overall functionality. So in the slide, I have mentioned two scenarios that you can take it to consider when prioritizing the edge cases. The first one is consider the edge cases potential impact on user safety, legal compliance, and business goals. The other one is gather feedback from users and stakeholders. So here, you can help identifying which edge cases are most important to address by taking the feedback from the users or from the stakeholders. So based on these two strategies, you can identify, so you can set the priority of the edge cases. Right. So we'll move to the next slide. That is the tips for edge case testing in your development. Okay, so here there are three tips that I found which we can use to this edge case testing. The first one is think from the perspective of your users. So how would they use the app? What path would they follow? If they had to do something unexpected, what would it be? These kind of questions that you can ask uh, from the perspective of the user's side uh, before you uh, define the test cases. The second one is think of unlikely scenarios in terms of app usage and failures. That means assume you're testing a mobile app. So in that case, uh, what if the battery died? And what if a call came while app was being used? And what if a notification came up? So you have to think the unlikely scenarios in terms of app usage and failures. The last tip is always have the mindset. If you can think it, the user can do it. So never assume and always test for all the possible paths because always you have to have the mindset that you are going to catch the edge case scenarios because it, as I told you before, it's not an easy thing to catch the edge case scenarios because you have to have a wide knowledge on the functionality and without rely on the happy path, you have to uh, test for the different paths, and you have to find out the edge case scenarios. So at the end, anyway, you will get a better product, and the product will be uh, good for any number of users without any complaints or any bugs in the product world. So those are the tips that I have mentioned here. So uh, as I mentioned you earlier, so I tried my best to emphasize what I really wanted to tell you about the importance of the edge case testing because sometimes we are not considering it as a very important thing in our testing life cycle. So these are the things that you can use and you can use to find the edge cases. So as the conclusion in this presentation, I want to say here we discuss how to find, how to prioritize, and how to test the edge cases. So then, based on these critical things based on these strategies, you can simply improve the overall quality of your product and you can increase the customer satisfaction. So you should not overlook the edge cases because that might be the key to your product success all the time. Okay, so that's what I really wanted to share with you today. So if you have any questions, you can raise. I'll try my best to answer for your questions.